Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me today in this live webinar on natural treatments for fertility according to Ayurveda. I'd like to read off, first of all, a quote or testimonial I have from one of my clients. And this testimonial with the person's name will be on my website, but we're just going to read the testimonial here. Working with Khabir gave me the gift of a natural menstrual cycle after it was absent for 26 years. I sought out help from a gynecologist and even had pellet insertions in my hip for hormone replacement therapy, and none of it worked. I felt like a dysfunctional, inadequate female due to not having a cycle and feared that since I was in my late 30s, it would never return. After taking the herbs and following Khabir's protocol for a few months, my cycle returned, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. It was an extremely healthy, normal cycle with no PMS symptoms. I felt like a miracle. Hope this inspires others to keep trying and never lose hope that they can become a healthy female. Ayurveda works, never give up. So I think this is a very encouraging testimonial here from a woman that struggled with infertility because she had no cycle for 26 years. And it shows the power of Ayurvedic approach to fertility and also the effectiveness of the herbal remedies. Now, of course, Ayurveda is an ancient system, so don't expect me to be speaking about follicle stimulating hormones or ovulation testing or even estrogen and progesterone peaks to determine ovulation exact timing. Now, this is a modern approach, and of course we don't use any hormone replacement therapy in Ayurveda as well. What we will cover here today is first some of the maybe not so recognized signs of infertility that many women don't seem to acknowledge, but are very clear in Ayurveda. And then we'll explain how these are doshic imbalances, because all disease, according to Ayurveda, is due to doshic imbalances and the accumulation of toxins or ama. So if we have ama or toxins in the female reproductive system, ovaries, fallopian tube, uterus, or we have a doshic imbalance, either high vata, high pitta, or high kapha, then in this case, the system or shukradatsu, the female reproductive system, will not be working properly and thus results in infertility. So first you have to look at the female reproductive system very holistically, and we'll explain it in a simple way about the Ayurvedic perspective of fine-tuning the female menstruation process and looking at the signs and symptoms of menstruation to determine its that it's in a healthy state by looking at the balance between vata, pitta, and kapha. Okay, and then we'll cover some dietary guidelines. Maybe we'll put in a few asanas and maybe pranayama recommendations, and of course we'll cover some major Western and Indian herbs that are used. And when we cover these herbs, then I'll show you some products that we use and some products that are traditionally used in Ayurveda, because there's already certain products that are made for and only used exclusively for fertility in Ayurveda. So first, let's start with, let's say, signs and symptoms of possible infertility. Now, of course, many diseases can also result in infertility, and that's a broad subject. Also, low libido is a symptom of low fertility or poor fertility. And in Ayurveda, this is also improved through herbal remedies, through improving the actual, not just function of the female reproductive system, but her libido. And then, of course, maybe one of the most important signs of infertility would just be irregular menses. Not that every woman has to have exactly 28 days, but the regularity is what's key. Irregular, particularly delayed menstruation, where menstruation is coming, after 45 days, and then it's very irregular every month. These are generally a sign of, poor fertility and possibly being infertile. And once again, I'll mention that what Ayurveda does is doesn't jump ahead and just start providing herbs or treatments for fertility, but steps back, looks at the signs and symptoms of the menstrual cycle from the perspective of Ayurveda in balancing Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And then when the menstrual cycle is working properly, then we provide the herbs that are for the actual fertility. So first, we always treat the menstrual cycle first, which of course is going to be involving, balancing the hormones, but not using hormone replacement. Other signs of possible infertility, of course, is excessive bleeding, including spotting or heavy menstruation bleeding, which can be also a sign of PCOS, which is another condition that would need to be resolved. So if you have PCOS, which is a common cause of infertility, then we treat first the PCOS, and then we continue to adjust the menstrual cycle so it's regular. And then third, then we provide the herbs for fertility. And then, of course, being overweight can lead to infertility, and also being underweight can lead to infertility. And even qualities such as being too cold and too dry can also be signs of infertility. So let's look at some of these indicators of an unhealthy menstrual cycle or indicators of possible infertility from the point of Ayurveda, because ultimately there's the underlying cause of all disease is the imbalance of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So we can look at the past history of a woman's menstrual cycle. And first, I'm going to cover Vata imbalance. Now, if there's a Vata imbalance in the woman's menstrual cycle, generally there's a Vata imbalance in the woman's Prakriti or Vikriti, or we could say body type. So first, for a Vata imbalance, the first sign of unhealthy menstruation is irregularity. Second would be a very light flow, very little bleeding, and possibly even spotting. And anxiety. Anxiety can also affect fertility, which could be, you could have signs of heart palpitation, nervousness, panic attacks. These could also be, just a sign of the anxiety, which also can be a cause of infertility. And these are all under the category of Vata imbalance. And of course, insomnia, poor sleep, cramping, abdominal pain. These are all PMS, premenstrual symptoms that we're talking about here. So if these indications are very clear, like irregular menstruation, anxiety before menstruation, cramping, lower back pain, then we can say that the Shukradhat, so the woman's female reproductive system, has a Vata imbalance, and this needs to be true. This needs to be addressed, and Vata needs to be balanced in this person. This person with this Vata imbalance more than likely has the Vata qualities of being very dry. Can be dry skin, dry stools, dry vaginal area. Very light means mucus spacey, lightheaded, forgetful, but also it means lightweight. Often women are underweight. In fact, the main category of women that I meet who come to me who have already, tried through Western means to become pregnant, through fertility hormone replacement and fertility testing that have not succeeded are underweight women. This is the main category that I've seen, which is a vata imbalance. Because in the West, we often think of a thin, skinny, maybe bony woman with her ribs sticking out as being attractive. But in Ayurveda, this is a vata imbalance. This woman is depleted. If your bones are sticking out on the back of your hands, your ribs are sticking out, and your joints are cracking, and you don't have much fat in the diet, and you've been fasting, living off of smoothies and coffee, you will be technically underweight to Ayurveda. And when you're underweight, you have a vata imbalance. You tend to be thin, cold, light, and dry. And this needs to be treated. Now, of course, women come to me with fertility issues and they go, oh, I don't care about my digestion. Oh, I don't care about my weight. My weight's fine. I'm happy with my weight. I want to focus on fertility. But this is not the right thinking. That's type of allopathic thinking. We have to step back. I will always treat the digestion, and I have to balance the doshic imbalance, which is affecting the reproductive system. In most cases, women are even missing whole months of menstruation when they're thin and depleted and undernourished and skipping meals and fasting and just living off of coffee and smoothies and things like this. They're insufficient fat, insufficient protein, extreme diets, extreme elimination of foods can lead to this vata imbalance. And then the menstrual cycle literally can stop after being irregular for years. So we see this with women who have, very much focused on dieting when it wasn't necessary. Okay, so if you're in that category, that's a vata imbalance. It needs to be addressed. The digestion needs to be addressed. Elimination needs to improve. Hydration needs to improve. Body temperature needs to be warmer. And we need to address this vata imbalance in the person holistically before we get to fertility treatments. The second category of imbalance is pitta imbalance. Now, pitta imbalance, the cycle can be regular, but the main sign is excess bleeding and heavy menstrual flow. And from the mental state, we see more, irritability, anger, headaches, even hot flashes and heat, rashes, and these other symptoms. If we hear this from a woman who's, infertile, and we have this heavy bleeding, of course, this heavy bleeding could be also a sign of fibroids or PCOS, and we need to determine that and treat that separately. But even if we don't have a fibroid present, which can cause heavy bleeding, or we don't have, PCOS, which also can be very painful and lead to bleeding, just these signs of excess bleeding, irritability, heavy menstrual flow need to be balanced. And of course, we're balancing pitta. What's increasing this flow often is hot spices, chili pepper, and other pitta increasing foods and lifestyle. So we have to still always step back and treat a person holistically and balance this imbalance in their whole system, and then also treat it in the female reproductive system. See, all Ayurvedic treatments are treating generally at 3 levels. Even a herbal formula is treating 3 levels. One is treating you holistically, your prakriti, your body type, 1, and 2, then it's treating the system involved. In this case, the reproductive system, the female reproductive system. And then 3rd, it's treating the imbalance, or you could call disease. So if you, an Ayurvedic doctor making a formula for you, will use herbs that balance your dosha, vata, pitta, kapha. He'll use herbs that support the imbalance in your reproductive system. And then he'll use herbs that are actually treating the condition meant to be treated. In this case, he'll put in herbs that are helping with fertility. And some of these herbs, like shatavari, can do more than one of these jobs. Shatavari is very reducing in pitta. It's very good for female reproductive system, and it's also good for fertility. But if the person is has a vata imbalance, then we'd have to add other herbs because those herbs are not balancing vata as well. So the third category of imbalance that could be indication of infertility is a kapha imbalance. Here, a menstrual flow is extremely heavy, craving for sweets, weight gain is one of the biggest signs, swelling, water retention, fatigue, breast swelling in particular, and mentally the feeling is of depression. So if we see these PMS indicators, as a history of the woman, then we know there's a kapha imbalance in her reproductive system. Now, the person more than likely also is kapha, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a vata pitta or kapha imbalance in your reproductive system that you also are the same vata pitta kapha. You could have a vata imbalance in your reproductive system and still be an overweight person. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're thin and underweight. And the same goes for kapha imbalance. You could have a fibroid or in your uterine fibroid or a cyst, which is a kapha imbalance, but you could be thin and underweight. So the person can have one imbalance, the reproductive system can have another imbalance. So you have to be able to diagnose both. There's no one single herb or formula that's going to provide you with, fertility like a magic wand or a pill. And that's why most fertility treatments have to be very customized. We have to listen to the individual. I have to have a history of their menstrual cycle and then formulate the herbs for that woman. And once these symptoms have been overcome, then we can change the herbs and move to the next stage. So once again, I repeat, first you have to balance the doshic imbalance, which will go back to the digestion of the person and balancing the vata pitta kapha in the person, which could mean losing weight, gaining weight, reducing heat, or reducing inflammation, increasing body heat. All these things are balancing the doshas holistically. Then second, we treat the reproductive system, which mostly we can use herbs, but if it's imbalanced due to the imbalance of the whole body, then they will find balance together. And then third, we provide the treatment for fertility. Okay, but what we don't want to do is think, hey, just give me the herbs for fertility, forget the rest. That's not the way it works. Okay, so let me give you a few dietary guidelines quickly here, and then we'll cover some herbs, some Western herbs I'll cover, and then some Indian herbs as well, because I'm a Western herbalist as well as an Indian herbalist. Now, first we have to understand that, fertility imbalance can be either vata pitta kapha because all systems and tissue in the body need a balance between these three energetics. But to be fertile, just as well as to carry a baby during pregnancy, it's generally a vata balancing diet. What's vata balancing diet? This means nourishing foods, building foods, including dairy, milk, cheese, animal protein, not skipping meals. What would be the opposite, of course, would be skipping meals, not having enough protein, not having enough fat, living off of coffee, and then you become deficient, depleted. Signs of deficiency and depletedness: dizzy, lightheaded, weak, hair falling out, broken fingernails, fatigue, all signs of this type of undernourishment, depletion, which unfortunately a lot of women put themselves through to diet. So you don't want to be on a weight loss detox plan to get pregnant. If there's excess weight or there's toxins in the liver or constipation issues, then these all need to be treated first before we focus on fertility, because some of these herbs are not even compatible with pregnancy. So once you're pregnant, there are certain herbs that you can no longer take, particularly bitter herbs cannot be taken during pregnancy, even during nursing. There's certain restrictions on herbs that can be taken. So any treatments that need to be done, that would include, let's say, detoxing the liver, the colon, or flushing out the gallbladder or such. These need to be done prior to, focusing on fertility. And then when you're focusing on fertility, it should be very nutritious, whole foods, no trans fats. That means no fast foods, no burgers, no pastries, no junk food. All processed food is full of trans fats and, bad fat, we could call it. And of course, nowadays, the research has proven that, these block some of the hormone receptor sites, but we're not going to go there to cellular level here. But other foods that we know are very helpful for pregnancy are all nourishing foods. A lot of nuts and seeds, walnuts, fish oil, evening primrose oil, which is always recommended for women. Certain nutrients you can be thinking of: fish oil, zinc, wheat germ oil, pumpkin seeds, both good for men and women, ground flax seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. But again, don't be snacking on them all day long. You just need to have these with your meals. So it's a nourishing, building diet, not a depleting diet. It's a home-cooked foods, no junk foods. It's a somewhat high-fat diet: flax seeds, olive oil, olives, avocados. It's not a fat-free diet, and it's not a low-protein diet. It's a building, strengthening diet. And of course, this should always be, the diet still needs to be adjusted for the individual, because if you're excessively overweight with 40 or 50 pounds, you cannot be eating meat and cheese and butter, just for fertility. So we have to focus on the weight loss first. And we know excess weight can be a cause of infertility. So it's better to step back, not be taking the fertility herbs right off the bat, work a couple months on losing the weight, where we can do more depleting diets with no fat, not much cheese or meat and animal protein, and help the person lose the weight with these cleansing, metabolism boosting herbs first. Lose the weight first, detox first, then we can focus on, and at the same time, we could work on the menstrual cycle, fine tuning it, I like to say. Ayurveda is a very sophisticated system. It's not so crude as just like, okay, you're low in a hormone, let's just put a patch or pellet in you and put it there, and then keep adjusting it to try to get it right. No, that's hormone replacement therapy. You're not treating anything. You're replacing the hormones that your body is supposed to be making. So in Ayurveda, even the herbs that are phytoestrogens and known to help support estrogen production, they themselves don't have estrogen in them. They just are, phytoestrogens. They're helping and supporting the endocrine system to produce the proper amount of hormones, or even reduce down the amount of hormones. So that's the use of these herbs, not adding estrogen artificially. But like I said, it's very sophisticated, just like Ayurveda is very sophisticated in the diet. That Ayurveda can adjust the diet so it's perfect. So there's hunger 3 times a day, there's bowel movements 3 times a day, no gas, no bloating, no constipation. It's very sophisticated in adjusting all these dietary imbalances, or digestive imbalances that we have. And the Western medicine just tends to ignore a lot of these digestive complaints and really has very little to offer, except for enzyme replacement. Sometimes, take enzyme replacement or take some type of blocker or inhibitor to stop your stomach acids. But this is a very crude approach to your digestion. So same with menstrual cycle. A good Ayurvedic doctor can fine tune the menstrual cycle so it's regular, not too much bleeding, no spotting, and less symptoms. The less symptoms a woman has prior to menstruation, PMS, the more healthy her menstrual cycle is. Just remember that. Regularity and minimum symptoms. Those are the signs of good, healthy menstruation and the signs of greater fertility. So this should not be ignored. It should be the main treatment initially is just to get the menstrual cycle to be as regular as possible with very few symptoms. And you notice from the quote that I read in the beginning, she was very surprised that she had no PMS symptoms. And I have many quotes from women who were very surprised that they had no menstrual symptoms. I had one woman, she joked, she said, after I took your herbs, I took your tea, you told me to drink your PMS tea 7 days before menstruation. I was just doing it, didn't even know I was menstruating. I just sat on the toilet one day, looked down, oh, menstruating. She said 0 symptoms. I just remember the way she said it. It was kind of cute. Oh, I looked down when I was in the toilet one time. Oh, I'm menstruating. So that is a nice sign that the cycle is working properly. Good sign of fertility. Besides, of course, other signs that we mentioned earlier, such as libido. Now, we'll cover herbs which are very effective. Let me start with a few Western herbs. We'll start with vitex berry or chasteberry. There we go, certified organic. We're only using certified organic herbs. And, chasteberry is, very nutritious herb for the whole endocrine system. And it's known to balance the hormones. It itself does not contain any estrogen. This is sometimes people think chasteberry or vitex berry has estrogen. No, it's, we could say phytoestrogen qualities, like fenugreek has phytoestrogen qualities. But vitex berry is one of the premier herbs for fertility, and it's promoting ovulation. And again, we didn't speak much on it, but of course, most women, they're doing tests to determine if they're ovulating, and they provide me with this information. There are other kind of more natural signs and symptoms to give me the information if a woman's ovulating. But most women have already done this work before they come to me, because most women go to the gynecologist, they do a lot of testing, and only when this is ineffective do they come to me. So they already have this information. And of course, if you're not ovulating, then this is a perfect herb, vitex berry, because it's promoting ovulation. And this vitex or chasteberry can be taken all month except during menstruation itself. Another great herb that's used both in Western and Chinese herbalism is dong quai. Dong quai is, it removes stagnation from the system. And it's very good if there's missed periods, cyst, PCOS. It improves circulation to the uterus, and it kind of tonifies, and even we could say relaxes the uterus and helps create kind of clean and healthy blood. It's also very safe. It shouldn't be used actually when the menstruation starts and there's bleeding, because it does thin the blood. We could say you wouldn't want to take it too much with a blood thinner as well. There's always counterindications to all herbs, but a lot of these herbs, are including dong quai, should not be taken once menstruation starts. And of course, it's kind of also by increasing the circulation to the uterus, it helps, nourish, and we could say oxygenate or provide more oxygen to the eggs. So very, very helpful. Dong quai, a very powerful and effective herb for fertility. And then next, we could talk about maca. Maca, again, is not a Indian herb or a Western herb. It's a South American herb, from Peru and Ecuador. And not only does it balance hormones, but it increases libido. And of course, many people know about this. And even it can be used for men to increase the sperm count. It's a tonic on the whole endocrine system. And it can not only, why we always include it is because not only can it help with balancing estrogen levels, but it helps balancing with progesterone as well. Other herbs, Indian herb, if we just want to cover across the board here, would be gokshura or tribulus. This stimulates also ovulation, and for men, and it increases sperm count. It's also libido boosting herb, not stimulating in the sense of like ginseng or this type of herbs, which are highly stimulating, or daminia, but it's, you know, is increasing the libido, or like we call aphrodisiac qualities, and it's basically food for the whole endocrine system. So as you could see, these formulas can be adjusted per the individual. If the woman is not ovulating and she comes and she says she's already done these tests, she's not ovulating, the cycle's irregular, we're trying to make the cycle irregular. So we're going to use more herbs that are promoting ovulation. If the woman is already ovulating but still infertile, then we're going to use less of the certain herbs and more of other herbs. And of course, if she has a vata imbalance, she's thin, light, dry, and extremely irregular menstruation, we're going to use slightly different herbs. And if she has heavy bleeding and pain, we're going to use slightly other herbs we're going to add to this formula. And if she has fibroids or a kapha imbalance in her menstruation, we're going to add different herbs. But so that's why we generally customize the herbs for the women once we get down to fertility. But a nice fertility formula would be, say, 50% maca, 10% vitex, 15% dong quai, some tribulus, and red raspberry leaf, which I didn't mention. But red raspberry leaf, it's also part of the mint family, but it's been used for thousands of years in Europe as a uterine tonic, and it's used for women after pregnancy to support the uterus, along with like other astringent herbs to help support the uterus after pregnancy. And also red raspberry tea is drinking by women, young women who are first having menstruation, women who it's basically a general uterine tonic. Every woman could be drinking a couple cups of red raspberry tea before menstruation, even if she had no symptoms at all. So let's look at a general formula that I have here that I've refined over 30 years of giving to women. And this is generally the tea that, you know, women are thanking me for not having any menstrual symptoms. And we're going to have a few more herbs here, which we can cover. That's it. PMS relief tea, hormonal balancing, relieving cramps, calming, and improves the mood. And there we can see the first ingredient is red raspberry leaf. So that is the base of the formula, because it's the uterine tonic. It's not so much for fertility, but we want to support the reproductive system. So we start off with a red raspberry leaf. And again, this formula is not for fertility, but overall reducing down the symptoms of menstruation and balancing the hormones. Passion flower is just a calming, relaxing herb for the nerves. St. John's wort, we know, is for the mood, particularly depression. Lavender just makes it smell nice and taste good. White willow bark is an astringent herb, also a uterine tonic. And then we have these phytoestrogens here: wild yam root, dong quai, which I mentioned, chase tree berry, which is vitex berry, which I mentioned, and then a fennel seed is just there for the taste, and feverfew is for headaches, and black cohash, another herb mostly used in hot flash issues, and we just use a small amount in there for helping to balance hormones, particularly progesterone. So you can see that those are even more herbs, but those are more for the symptoms of PMS. Well, fertility, we wouldn't need all those herbs. Like I said, we could just do maca, vitex, dong quai, gokshura in a base of with some red raspberry leaf. That would be just focusing on fertility alone. But like I said, I would go 3 steps. First, improve the person's digestion, elimination, balance vata pitta kapha, either increase weight, increase weight as needed in the woman, and then simultaneously be working on the menstrual cycle, probably starting with that tea, but then, after one or two cycles, I could make a custom tea for the woman. And then once we have the menstrual cycle going, that tea could then evolve into a fertility tea in the third stage. So that said, there are a lot of Indian herbs that are used for fertility. The main one being, of course, as we know, shatavari. This organic shatavari from India. And, shatavari means a woman with 100 husbands. So I think you got the point. So this is obviously a very nourishing herb. It's very cooling for just because the female reproductive system cannot be too hot in a sense, or too pitta. So it's balancing mostly pitta, helps with excess bleeding. It's nourishing the uterus. It's helping the ovaries, and it's also a mild aphrodisiac. It's really one of the best herbs for balancing hormones in Ayurveda is shatavari. So the base herb, and of course it helps with dryness, including vaginal dryness. And it's also provided in shatavari ghee, where it's cooked in ghee, and this is used specifically for vaginal dryness. It can be also inserted in the vaginal, in the vagina as well. Now, it's usually mixed with other herbs to balance the dosha. And here's like a female hormonal formula here. And we don't really call it fertility formula, but, female health formula. But it does nourish the female reproductive organs and balances the hormones. And we can see here we have 3 herbs. The first one being shatavari. There we go. Shatavari, ashoka, and lodra. Only 3 herbs, but mostly it's shatavari. And ashoka, its meaning means friend of the woman. In fact, I read in ancient Ayurvedic texts that they used to recommend the young woman, when she began her menstruation, to go sleep under an ashoka tree. I haven't tested that out. But we know ashoka is very good for the woman's reproductive system. So that's a very, and lodra also is well known to help with tonifying and strengthening the uterus. And that's a general health tonic for women. Now, when we talk about other menstruation formulas, I have the ones coming straight from India. Shukra Grita, Shukamara ghee, or Shukra Grita as I call it. See, we wrote on the staff wrote on there, menstruation ghee as we call it. It's in ghee. A lot of the female reproductive formulas are in ghee, and that is a formula. So often I will give a combination, particularly if the woman is a vata or pitta. I will use the ghee, not if they're kapha or overweight. So I'll often give out the tea plus menstruation ghee, as we call it. And this is working very well, very effective within 1 or 2 months. Or sometimes I will provide these two together. This is also another combination that I do. Now, there is, of course, in Ayurveda, a fertility product we call it fertility ghee, we call it. But here's how it comes from India. Palgrita, I call it palgrita, and this is used for fertility. So we, do import a lot of herbs from India, and that's the way they come. But we put it, and it is a formula, and we put it in jars, and we call it fertility ghee. So that would be provided not initially, in most cases, at least on the second appointment or third appointment. Once we've balanced the dosha, menstrual cycle is regular, symptoms are minimal, diet has been changed, and husband has also started taking herbs. We can't forget the man. So generally, we'll always send along some male reproductive support, even if he's quite sexually active. This is helping him to become stronger, and as it says there, increases the sperm count. So we're not going to go into all those herbs, but generally this is often given to the woman to take home to her husband, and I even encourage the man to come to the appointment because he could also have some imbalances of his male reproductive system, Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, which could be the cause of the infertility. So we have to also treat the husband, bring him along. Okay, well, I hope this gives you understanding of the great possibilities in treating fertility. Even like the client testimonial I said in the beginning, she said 26 years after going to many gynecologists and doing hormone replacement therapy, she was unsuccessful. And within a few months, with this approach that I've just described to you, which is the Ayurvedic approach, this is not my approach, this is not my system. In fact, I learned even about many of these herbs like Shukra Grita and Apal Grita from Ayurvedic women doctors in India whose specialty was fertility. And I spent time with them, asked them a lot of questions, and explained what I knew, and we had discussions from the Ayurvedic perspective. And then I learned through this way. But you already have to have a very high level of knowledge of these herbs to be able to use them. But ultimately, you also need a teacher to be able to, who has decades of experience, to be able to understand how to use the herbs and how to treat the individual. And no woman would get the exact same herbs, even though if I have 10 women with infertility, then they're still going to get entirely different herbs. And since I'm a Western herbalist and an Indian herbalist, and you can see I'm using a few South American herbs and even have a few Chinese herbs as well, every herbalist could do different herbs. A Chinese herbalist could also achieve the same objective, particularly if they looked at the woman's lifestyle and diet as well, and didn't just provide only herbs and acupuncture. So Chinese herbalists, South American herbalists, Indian herbalists, Western herbalists, they're all capable of improving fertility based on their herbs that they use in their system. I just using a combination a lot of times of Western herbs and Indian herbs together, but that's just my particular style. But I look at the condition and the imbalances and the state of the female reproductive system only from the Ayurvedic perspective. I don't need to know estrogen levels and progesterone levels. It's not necessary for me to treat. Because we can treat and understand the state of the female reproductive system without this type of information. This is a modern approach, and we're using an ancient Ayurvedic approach, which has worked for thousands of years, and they had infertility issues thousands of years ago. They worked on these, they documented what to do, they documented the imbalances, and they made specific formulas, which, like Palgrita, that I showed you, that are made specifically for fertility. So hope is there, help is there, and I invite you to contact me if you'd like assistance in improving your reproductive system or managing your menstrual symptoms, and of course, fertility. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you the best of health and happiness. And for those who have not conceived and want to, I hope that you achieve this, as of course we all know having children is very rewarding, and I hope to help those of you who are unable to conceive to conceive. If you contact me, I will do my best. Thank you very much once again.